The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with noise and light, a place where the leaders of many empires gathered to discuss the future of the stars. Tall figures with shimmering skin, scaled beings with glowing eyes, and machine-born minds projected into crystal forms all shared the vast hall. Yet on this day, silence slowly spread among them, because an old voice had spoken. The voice belonged to Admiral Corrin of the Tarlith, one of the oldest surviving warriors in the galaxy. His scales were faded, his crest bent with age, but his eyes were sharp. He rose slowly, leaning on a staff, and every empire's representative turned to listen, for he was not known for wasted words. He looked at them all and said, "Do not challenge the humans, for they will shatter your empire." The words echoed in the chamber. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably. Others laughed with disbelief. A few hissed in anger. Corrin's reputation was strong, but his warning seemed absurd to many, for humans were a young species, born on a single blue world. Their fleets were small compared to the mighty armadas of the great empires. A warlord of the Varkesh Dominion slammed his clawed hand on the table, his golden armor shining in the light. "You speak madness, old one," he growled. "Humans are primitive, they are reckless and fragile. We could crush their fleets in a single day." His words earned a murmur of agreement from others, but Corrin did not falter. His deep voice carried across the chamber. "You see weakness, because you judge them by your own measures. You believe their small numbers make them weak. You believe their short lives make them foolish. But I have seen their ships in battle. I have watched how they fight, and I tell you this, no empire fights like the humans." The council chamber grew tense, his words painting images in the minds of all who listened. He spoke of skirmishes on the outer borders, where human patrols had faced pirates and raiders. He described how the humans did not retreat. Even when outnumbered, they adapted, learned, and struck back with deadly force. He told of human captains who used daring maneuvers that no alien commander would dare attempt, throwing ships into impossible battles and somehow surviving. The representative of the Siller Collective, a machine intelligence, spoke with a cold metallic tone. "This is anecdote, Admiral. Show us proof. Show us why we should fear a species that has existed in space for less than 3 centuries. Corrin's voice dropped lower, carrying the weight of memory. "I was there at Draven's Reach," he said. The chamber went quiet again, for Draven's Reach was a name that stirred whispers. It was a battle spoken of in fragments, where something terrible had happened. A fleet of slavers entered human territory, believing they would harvest colonies without resistance. They never returned. Only fragments of ships, drifting and burning, were found. The Varkesh warlord laughed harshly. "So they destroyed raiders, what of it? Any empire could have done the same." Corrin's eyes narrowed, his voice cutting like a blade. "You do not understand. The humans did not just win, they made an example. They hunted the slavers down, one by one, across light years, until none were left alive. Their vengeance was total. Their message was clear: attack them, and you will not survive." Murmurs spread across the chamber, some voices rising in disbelief, others growing quiet with unease. The words painted humans not as prey, but as predators, silent and relentless. The representative of the Shalath, Ninian, leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You would have us fear them as if they were gods, but they are flesh and blood, like all of us. What makes them different?" Corrin's answer came slowly, each word heavy. "Because they fight for survival, not for power, not for expansion. Survival. To them, every battle is a final battle. Every war is fought as if it will decide their very existence, and that makes them dangerous beyond measure." The chamber grew restless, some dismissed his warning, others grew uneasy, but no one could deny the fire in Corrin's voice. The old admiral stood taller, his gaze sweeping across the hall. "You may laugh, you may ignore my words, but I tell you this: should you test them, should you raise your fleets against Earth, you will find only ashes where your proud empire once stood." His words lingered, heavy and cold. Silence fell. Broken only by the low hum of the council chamber's machines, the alien leaders exchanged glances, torn between pride and doubt, between arrogance and fear. Outside the chamber, the stars burned on, silent witnesses to the warning. And somewhere far away, in the dark reaches of space, human warships trained in silence, their captains watching, waiting, preparing for the day when someone would ignore the warning and challenge them. The stars outside the great chamber burned silently as the council meeting ended. But the warning of Admiral Curran did not fade. It lingered like smoke in the air, heavy and difficult to ignore. Many of the gathered empires dismissed his words as the fear of an old soldier, yet there were some who could not shake the chill in their bones. The image of humans hunting their enemies across the stars stayed in their thoughts. Still, pride and arrogance are often stronger than wisdom, and pride filled the hearts of the Varkesh Dominion. The Varkesh were not only powerful but also cruel. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems, built on conquest and the subjugation of weaker races. They were a species of warriors who believed themselves invincible. For generations they had crushed resistance wherever it rose. Their fleets were vast, their armies countless, and their technology refined by centuries of war. To them, the idea that humans, a species barely stepping into the stars, could pose a threat was laughable. When the council dismissed the meeting, the Varkesh warlord, High Commander Zorith, gathered his officers in the shadowed halls of their embassy. His eyes glowed like molten gold as he declared that the humans would be tested. Zorith's plan was simple. He would send a fleet to blockade the human world called Earth. He believed that if humans were confronted with overwhelming power, they would kneel like so many others before them. It would be a demonstration of Varkesh dominance, a warning to other empires that the Dominion still ruled unchallenged. Fleets were called to assemble, colossal warships with hulls like mountains, bristling with cannons that had reduced cities to rubble and vaporized entire colonies. Their engines roared as they prepared for the journey across the void. Yet as the Dominion prepared, whispers spread through the other empires. Some feared what would come, remembering the words of Admiral Curran. Others secretly welcomed the move, believing that if the humans were crushed, the galaxy would rest easier. But there were a few who watched in silence, choosing neither side, curious to see whether the warning had been truth or madness. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity had not been blind. They had long suspected that their rapid rise into the stars would attract attention. They had watched the movements of alien fleets, studied the shadows of espionage, and intercepted fragments of coded transmissions. Their leaders had argued in secret chambers, some urging caution and diplomacy, others demanding preparation for the inevitable clash. In the end, humanity had done what it always did. It prepared. Quietly but thoroughly, their shipyards burned bright, launching sleek warships armed with weapons no alien had yet faced. Their captains trained tirelessly, learning not just the maneuvers of war but the psychology of their potential enemies. When the Varkesh fleet finally arrived on the edge of the Sol system, it filled the void with its massive presence. Thousands of alien warriors stood ready aboard their ships, their commanders confident. Their sensors scanned Earth and its colonies, expecting fear, surrender, perhaps a desperate plea for mercy. Instead, what they found was silence. The humans did not send envoys. They did not send diplomats. No surrender message came. The silence stretched for hours, then days, until even the proud commanders of the Dominion began to grow restless. High Commander Zorith snarled to his officers that the humans were cowards, hiding in their world, too weak to rise and fight. He ordered the fleet to press closer, to unleash a show of power that would shake Earth to its core. But in the darkness of space, human warships waited, unseen and silent, their captains calm, their orders clear. Humanity would not bow. Humanity would not beg. If the Dominion had come to test them, they would answer in fire. And in that moment, the stage was set for the first great clash between mankind and the empire that believed itself eternal. The galaxy held its breath. though it did not know it, for history was about to change. The silence of Earth's defenders stretched long enough to gnaw at the patience of the Varkesh commanders. Their mighty fleet hovered on the edge of the Sol system like a storm cloud waiting to break. Their engines glowed with violent energy, and their cannons were charged, ready to deliver destruction on a scale that most civilizations could never endure. High Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, his armored claws gripping the command rail. His voice growled through the cums as he ordered the ships to move closer, convinced that the humans were hiding in fear. But what he did not realize was that the humans had already chosen their battlefield, and they had been watching every move of the Dominion's forces since the first warship entered their system. Hidden beyond the edge of planetary sensors, within the cold embrace of asteroid fields and orbital shadows, human fleets lay silent. Their warships were not vast in number, but they were sleek, compact, and deadly, their hulls reinforced with alloys unknown to the wider galaxy. Their engines designed for sudden bursts of speed and precise maneuvers that alien ships could scarcely imagine. Human captains sat at their stations with steady hands, eyes fixed on tactical displays, waiting for the signal that would begin. The first true clash between Earth and the Dominion. Humanity did not believe in testing the waters. They believed in striking hard, striking fast, and leaving their enemies with no chance to recover. When the Varkesh fleet crossed into the asteroid belt near Mars, the trap was sprung, without warning, without ceremony. The blackness of space erupted with streaks of fire as human missiles and railgun rounds burst from hidden launchers. Precision-guided weapons tore through the void, striking the exposed flanks of the alien formation. The Dominion ships reeled under the assault, shields flaring, hulls cracking, explosions rippling across their once perfect formations. Confusion erupted among their crews, for they had not expected resistance so sudden, so calculated. The bridge of Zorath's flagship shook as alarms screamed. His officers shouted reports of losses. Their formation was breaking apart under the relentless human strike. He snarled, in rage, demanding a counterattack. His fleet opened fire into the shadows of space. Great cannons blasting asteroids into dust, beams of light lashing across the void. But the humans were not there to be found. Their ships had already moved, darting through the chaos, vanishing from enemy sensors, appearing only long enough to unleash another devastating barrage. What unsettled the Varkesh most was not just the damage, but the precision. Every shot from the humans carried purpose. Every missile struck with intent. They did not fire blindly. They did not waste effort. It was as if each captain knew exactly where to strike, exactly how to turn the tide of fear against their enemy. Dominion ships burned one after another, their crews screaming as fire consumed their corridors, as atmosphere vented into the void. Human warships cut through the great armada like wolves among cattle, swift and merciless. The galaxy had seen wars before, but never like this. Alien fleets fought in ways bound by tradition. With honor, with ceremony, they marched into battle, in grand formations that displayed their power. But the humans fought with a different logic. They were hunters. They were predators of the highest order. They turned the battlefield into a place of shadows and sudden death, never giving their enemy the comfort of knowing where the next blow would land, never giving them the rhythm of battle to cling to. This was war stripped of pride, stripped of ritual, reduced to survival. And in survival, humanity excelled. As hours stretched into a nightmare, the Dominion realized that they had not come to intimidate a weak species. They had stumbled into the jaws of a force they had never truly understood. Their arrogance had blinded them, and now their ships lay broken, drifting, burning against the cold stars. High Commander Zorath's golden armor no longer gleamed with pride but was blackened with the smoke of failing systems. His fleet that once numbered in the hundreds was now a scattered remnant, fighting not for victory but for escape. Yet the humans did not relent. They pressed forward with ruthless efficiency, their warships moving as one mind, striking wherever weakness showed. Their captains never hesitated. never paused to reconsider, for they knew what was at stake. They knew that if humanity ever faltered, it would be crushed beneath the heel of greater powers. And so they fought with the certainty that only comes from necessity, and in that certainty, they carved fear into the hearts of the Varkish. By the time the survivors fled into the depths of space, pursued to the very edge of the system, the legend of humanity's first true battle had been born. It was not a victory written with glory, but with terror. The Dominion had come expecting submission, and instead they had tasted annihilation. Their proud fleet, once the symbol of their unbreakable empire, was now reduced to scattered wreckage and broken pride. And Admiral Koran's words began to echo in the hearts of those who had once laughed. The galaxy had not been watching, not yet, but soon the news would spread, carried by whispers and scattered signals, and when it did, the empires would remember the warning spoken in the council chamber. They would remember the fire in the old admiral's voice, and they would begin to understand that humans were not weak, they were not prey. There was something far more dangerous, something the galaxy had not seen in ages, a species that fought not for power, but for survival, and in that survival, they would shatter empires. The smoke of battle still hung in the void long after the Dominion fleet had limped away. Their once proud formation now scattered debris drifting through the dark. Yet what haunted the survivors most was not the loss of ships, but the way the humans had fought. For no empire in living memory had seen tactics so alien, so relentless, so effective. Among the Varkesh commanders there was disbelief, for their military doctrine had been refined over centuries, built upon order, discipline, and brute force. They fought with massive fleets arranged in rigid formations, each move calculated to project strength and overwhelm their opponent with raw firepower. They could not comprehend a style of war that rejected such rules. Yet the humans had done just that. Humanity had not matched them ship for ship or gun for gun. Instead, they had fought like predators in the dark, choosing the time and place of every strike, turning the Dominion's size into a weakness rather than a strength. Human warships moved with an unpredictability that unsettled even the most seasoned. Alien captains, one moment they were ghosts on the edge of sensors, the next they were within striking range, unleashing precise volleys before vanishing again. Their use of stealth and speed seemed reckless, yet every maneuver had purpose, every risk calculated. Human captains were willing to sacrifice ships if it meant delivering a crippling blow. They understood that victory was not measured by survival alone, but by the destruction of the enemy's ability to continue the fight. And this philosophy made them terrifying opponents. In the aftermath of the battle, reports gathered from scattered survivors painted the same image again and again. Human fleets did not fight for glory or honor. They fought with the cold efficiency of a species that had known war as survival for as long as it had existed. Their strategies were not written in ancient doctrines, but in instincts honed by centuries of conflict among themselves. They adapted faster than any foe, turning mistakes into lessons and lessons into weapons. No engagement played out the same way twice, for humans never repeated themselves. They learned and they evolved mid-battle, something the rigid empires of the galaxy could scarcely imagine. Whispers spread quickly through the stars. Other empires listened to the tales of survivors and struggled to believe. Could it be true that humanity had mastered a form of warfare unseen in the galaxy? One that was not bound by tradition or pride, but driven by necessity and creativity. Even those who doubted found themselves unnerved by the pattern. For if the Dominion could be so bloodied in their first clash with humans, what would happen if the war escalated? What would happen if humanity turned its full strength against the wider galaxy? For the humans, however, the battle was not a matter of legend, it was survival. In their war councils they studied every move, every casualty, every success. They did not see themselves as invincible, but as vulnerable. And it was this awareness that drove them to prepare harder than any other race. Their commanders spoke not of triumph, but of the need to be sharper, faster, more ruthless. They knew the Dominion would not stop. They knew others would come, and they understood that hesitation would mean extinction. Alien spies who observed humanity in the aftermath returned with chilling reports. Human training drills were unlike anything seen before. Crews practiced chaotic scenarios where nothing went as planned. Simulations where orders were cut off, where ships fought in the dark without communication, and still they adapted, still. They survived where alien fleets would crumble without direction. Human crews improvised and carried on. Their resilience was as terrifying as their weapons. What truly disturbed those who watched, however, was the human willingness to endure loss. Where other species measured victory by minimizing casualties, humans accepted sacrifice as part of survival. They mourned their dead but did not falter if a ship had to be destroyed to win a battle. It was destroyed without hesitation. If a colony had to burn so the greater war could be won, humans would burn it and rise again from the ashes. This ruthless practicality was alien to the galaxy, and it made them seem unstoppable, even within. The Dominion itself, quiet doubt began to creep into the hearts of lesser commanders. The High Commander still roared of vengeance, promising to return with overwhelming strength, but in the private chambers of fleet officers, whispers grew, questions they dared not speak aloud. Could they truly crush a species that refused to fight by the rules? Could they truly conquer an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every battle? Admiral Korean's words spread farther with each passing day, retold in secret meetings and intercepted transmissions. And though many still mocked the old warrior, others began to see the truth in his warning, for the humans did not fight as prey, they fought as hunters, and every empire knew in its bones what it meant to be hunted. The galaxy was beginning to learn a lesson it had long forgotten. Strength was not only in numbers or in firepower, but in will, in adaptability, in the refusal to yield. And humanity possessed all of these in abundance. The battle with the Dominion was not the end, it was the beginning. And those who had laughed at the idea of humans as a threat now began to fear what might come when the next fleet tested their resolve. And as human warships returned to their stations, silent and watchful, the question echoed through the stars. Not if the humans would be challenged again, but who would be foolish enough to be next. Asterisk fear spread more quickly than light racing. Across the galaxy in whispers carried by broken signals, intercepted transmissions, and the terrified words of survivors. The battle that was meant to be a demonstration of Dominion strength had instead become a lesson that shook every empire. For the Varkesh had not returned as conquerors, they had returned as remnants, their ships crippled, their formations scattered, their pride shattered. No one had expected such a result, not from a species as young as humanity. And now the question on every tongue was no longer if the humans were dangerous, but how dangerous could they become in the grand halls of the Shalath Dominion, where leaders wrapped in flowing robes once spoke with voices dripping in superiority. Debates turned bitter. Their scholars argued that the reports must be exaggerated, that no fledgling species could humble the great Dominion in such a way. But the images of wrecked ships did not lie. The recordings of burning hulks drifting in Saul's asteroid fields could not be denied. Younger commanders whispered of tactics they had never seen before, maneuvers that defied logic, weapons that struck with unnatural precision. Some wanted to study these humans, to understand them. Others demanded that they be destroyed before they grew stronger. The machine-minded Siller Collective processed the news with cold precision, yet even their algorithms flagged humanity as an anomaly. Their records compared thousands of battles across centuries, and none matched the unpredictable, adaptive warfare that humanity had displayed. Their logical conclusion was troubling. If left unchecked, humanity's methods could spread like infection. Their tactics could rewrite the way war was fought in the galaxy, and that alone made them a threat to order. Some of the machine lords urged immediate containment, while others, curious and calculating, proposed watching humanity from the shadows, learning their secrets before deciding their fate. Among the smaller empires, those who had long suffered under the boots of greater powers, the whispers of humanity carried a different tone in the taverns of miners, in the hidden resistance cells of conquered worlds. The story of humans who had faced the Dominion and sent them fleeing lit sparks of hope. If humans could fight back, perhaps others could as well. Perhaps the galaxy was not ruled solely by the strong, but could be reshaped by those who dared to resist. For the first time in ages, the idea of rebellion stirred in the dark corners of forgotten worlds. Within the Dominion itself, fear ate away at loyalty. High Commander Zorath roared to his people that vengeance would come, that the humans would pay for the humiliation inflicted upon their empire. But behind the polished walls of war councils, his officers doubted in silence. They remembered the chaos, the way human ships struck from shadows, the way their cannons carved through mighty war cruisers as if tearing into fragile hulls. They remembered the way no formation could contain them, how no plan held long against their shifting maneuvers. They knew that another clash might not end in recovery, but in complete destruction. Humanity's name grew sharper with each retelling. And with it, unease spread wider. No longer were humans dismissed as upstarts or curiosities. They were spoken of as a force, unpredictable and dangerous. Some called them wolves among sheep. Others called them fire in the dark. But all agreed that they could no longer be ignored. Yet what unsettled the galaxy most was the silence that followed the battle. For humans did not boast. They did not proclaim victory. Their fleets did not parade their strength across the stars. Instead, they disappeared back into their shadows, leaving wreckage behind and no explanation. That silence was worse than any threat. It left every empire wondering what humanity was preparing, what new weapons they were building, what new strategies they were creating in the darkness of their shipyards. The unknown weighed heavily, for prideful empires could prepare for enemies they understood. But how could they prepare for an enemy whose methods defied tradition? An enemy who struck without warning and vanished before you could answer. In the council chambers of neutral powers, debates grew fierce. Should humanity be approached as an ally or feared as a rival? Was it wiser to extend hands of diplomacy or to sharpen swords before it was too late? But even those who spoke of peace could not silence the quiet dread, for if the humans could humble the Dominion, what chance did weaker empires have if they ever stood in humanity's path? And so the galaxy entered a time of waiting, waiting for the next clash, waiting for the next move, waiting for humanity to show whether they would be destroyers or protectors. The fear was not simply in what humanity had done, but in what they might choose to do next. The stars had not felt such tension in generations, and all who gazed into the void wondered if the old admiral's words had been prophecy. Challenge them, and they will shatter your empire. Asterisk. The Dominion had thought the battle in Seoul was only a setback, a temporary wound to be healed by calling upon the full weight of their empire. But humanity did not grant them the luxury of time, even as the survivors of their broken fleet limped home to repair. Human war councils had already decided their path. They would not wait for the Dominion to gather strength and strike again. They would carry the fire into enemy space. They would show the galaxy that Earth would not simply defend itself. It would strike at the heart of anyone who dared to challenge it. The fleets of humanity moved with a swiftness that confounded alien logic. Their shipyards had produced not only warships but also supply vessels, refitted freighters, and stealth carriers capable of slipping through enemy patrol lines unnoticed. They studied the Dominion's maps, intercepted their communications, and learned their supply routes. While the Dominion rebuilt in plain sight, the humans prepared in silence, each captain sworn to secrecy, each crew hardened with the knowledge that they were not fighting for conquest, but for survival itself. Their orders were clear: strike fast, strike hard, and leave nothing for the enemy to recover. When the humans entered Dominion space, they did so not as invaders who sought banners and parades, but as predators slipping into the hunting grounds of the overconfident. Their first attacks were not against fleets, but against the arteries of the Dominion: supply convoys, fuel stations, and communication hubs were torn apart in carefully planned raids. Dominion commanders scrambled to respond, but by the time their fleets arrived, the humans were gone, leaving only burning wreckage and silence in their wake. For every system the Dominion thought was secure, a human fleet would appear as if from the shadows strike and vanish once more. At first, Zoreth dismissed these attacks as cowardice, harassment that could be crushed once his full fleet was ready. But the weeks turned to months and the pattern grew darker. The raids spread deeper into Dominion space, growing bolder, more precise, until even the inner systems trembled. Entire sectors began to starve as food shipments were destroyed. Shipyards lay dark after their fuel supplies were cut, and colonies that had once praised the Dominion now cursed its name, asking why their rulers could not protect them from this relentless enemy. And then came the day when the humans no longer struck from the shadows, but arrived in open strength. Their fleets descended upon the capital world of the Dominion with a precision that defied belief. Great carriers and cruisers cut through the orbital defenses as if they had trained for that one battle alone. Ground installations were reduced to rubble by orbital bombardments, so exact that they crippled military targets while sparing civilian centers. The message was clear. Humanity sought not blind slaughter, but the destruction of the Dominion's war machine. The skies above the Varkesh capital burned with streaks of fire. The once proud towers of their military academies crumbled. Shipyards that had built the pride of their fleet erupted into flames that lit the night. The people of the Dominion watched in terror as human warships held their skies, silent and unyielding. They did not taunt. They did not negotiate. They simply hovered like executioners awaiting judgment. Their very presence was a declaration that the Dominion's age of invincibility was over. Across the galaxy, empires watched in disbelief as the reports came in. Never before had a younger species struck so deep, so fast, into the heart of a great power. Never before had an empire so feared been brought to its knees in such a calculated fashion. Fear turned to dread, dread turned to quiet panic, for if the Dominion could burn, what empire was safe? What shield strong enough? What fleet vast enough to stop the humans if they chose to strike? Within the shattered halls of the Dominion's government, High Commander Zoreth raged, but even his fury could not hide the truth. His fleets were broken, his people afraid, his enemies emboldened. The war he had thought to win easily was slipping beyond his control. He had thought to humble humanity, but now it was the Dominion that stood humbled, its empire smoldering under the relentless fire of human precision. And as the human fleets pulled back from the capital, leaving ruin behind but not conquest, the galaxy shuddered at the meaning. Humanity had not come to enslave. They had not come to expand their borders. They had come to send a message, a single warning written in fire and ash. Challenge them, and your empire will burn. Asterisk, the fires that had torn across the Dominion's capital world still glowed in the memory of every empire when the humans finally spoke. Not with boastful words, not with arrogant proclamations, but with a single message carried across the stars. A voice broadcast from the flagship of Earth's fleet, clear and steady, calm yet colder than any silence. It reached not only the surviving commanders of the Dominion, but the Council itself, and through hidden relays, even the ears of distant empires. The message was simple, yet it carried a weight heavier than any fleet. Challenge us again, and your empires will fall as the Dominion has fallen. Those words, spoken without anger and without triumph, struck harder than any weapon, for they revealed the truth that the galaxy had been too proud to accept. Humanity did not fight for conquest. They did not hunger for territory or glory. They fought only to survive, and in that survival, they were willing to burn entire empires to the ground if forced. In the shattered halls of the Dominion, the warning fell like a final blow. High Commander Zoreth raged, but his voice no longer carried the same fire. His officers no longer believed in his promises of vengeance. His people no longer looked to him as their shield. They looked upward to the skies where human warships had hovered like silent judges. their presence etched into the nightmares of a proud species now reduced to whispers of fear. The empire that once ruled through terror had now tasted a terror far greater. Across the galaxy, the words of humanity rippled outward. Empires that had once dismissed Earth as insignificant now gathered in hushed councils, debating what path to take. The Shalath argued for alliances, fearful that standing alone would invite disaster. The Scylla collective processed scenario after scenario, their cold machines acknowledging with rare hesitation that no probability model could predict a certain victory against humanity's unpredictable nature. And among the smaller empires, long subdued under the heel of giants, the message became a spark of hope. For if the dominion could fall, then no oppressor was beyond reach. Yet the most unsettling part of humanity's warning was not in what was said, but in what was left unsaid. They did not declare themselves rulers. They did not demand tribute. They did not seek to bend others into submission. They only promised destruction if challenged. And that left the galaxy in a state of anxious uncertainty, for no one could know what the humans would choose to do. Next, if they sought only peace, then perhaps they could be left alone. But if they were provoked, if they were tested, then the fate of the Dominion would not be unique. In the great chambers of the Galactic Council, Admiral Corrine sat in silence. As the message was played, the old warrior did not smile. Though his warning had been vindicated, his eyes carried no joy in being proven right. For he understood better than most that what had been unleashed was not just a victory, but a shift in the balance of power that the galaxy had not seen in centuries. He knew the fear that now gripped the empires would either force them into reckless alliances or desperate wars, and in both paths, humanity would be at the center. The final warning echoed across star systems, carried in official transmissions and whispered in the shadows of taverns and barracks alike. Some heard it as a threat, others as a promise, but all understood it as truth. For the sight of Dominion fleets reduced to ashes was not rumor. It was fact, and facts could not be erased. And so the galaxy entered a new age of caution, one in which the thought of war with humanity was weighed not in ambition, but in dread. And above it all, human warships slipped back into the dark, their engines silent, their captains watchful, their orders unchanged. They did not linger to gloat. They did not bask in fear. They simply prepared, for humanity knew the galaxy would not remain still forever. They knew pride would rise again among other powers, that someone would always test the strength of Earth, and when that day came, they would answer as they had always answered, swiftly, decisively, without hesitation. Thus the warning was not simply to the Dominion, but to every empire that watched from afar. Do not challenge the humans, for if you do, the flames that consumed the Dominion will consume you as well, and your proud banners will burn in the same silence of space, leaving only ashes to mark your fall. The war was over, yet its echo lingered in every corner of the galaxy. The Dominion was not destroyed completely, but it was broken in spirit, its fleets shattered, its pride stripped away, its people left, staring into the sky with fear where once they had looked with arrogance. For the first time in living memory, the empire that had conquered worlds without hesitation now whispered in silence, and that silence spread. It touched every world, every council, every outpost, carrying the weight of a truth that could not be denied. Humanity had changed the order of the stars. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, there was no celebration, only unease. The representatives sat in hushed tones, the memory of Admiral Corrine's warning now carved into their hearts. He had told them the truth, and they had not listened. Now they debated with trembling voices. Some argued that the humans must be approached, that alliances must be formed, treaties signed, bonds forged to keep them from turning their fire on others. But others feared that such closeness would only invite humanity to study their weaknesses, and in time, perhaps to strike them down. As well, every empire now walked with hesitation, for no one knew what the humans wanted, and uncertainty is the sharpest blade in the dark. Beyond the councils and halls of power, in the taverns of border colonies, in the workshops of miners, in the hidden dens of rebels. The story of humanity was retold 1,000 different ways. To some it was a tale of vengeance, of fire raining from the skies to punish arrogance. To others it was a story of hope, proof that even the greatest oppressor could bleed. Whispers spread among the enslaved and the conquered. If humans could break the dominion, perhaps they could break others too. Perhaps the galaxy was not bound to the old powers forever. Perhaps change had already begun, yet humanity itself remained silent. Their fleets vanished back into the black. Their soldiers returned to their worlds. Their leaders spoke only to their own people. They did not claim new territory. They did not raise banners over conquered planets. They left only ruins where the Dominion's strength had once stood. And this silence was more terrifying than any fleet, for empires could fight armies. They could resist invasions, but how could they resist an enemy whose desires they could not read, whose next move they could not predict? On Earth, preparations did not stop. Shipyards still burned with industry. Training halls still echoed with drills. The people knew the truth, that this battle was only the first. The galaxy had seen their strength, and some would fear them enough to leave them alone, but others would fear them enough to strike first. Humanity would not be caught unready. They would sharpen their blades, strengthen their fleets, and watch the stars with unblinking eyes, for survival demanded vigilance. And survival was all they had ever known. Admiral Corran, old and weary, sat in his quiet quarters as the reports came in. The galaxy called humanity monsters, saviors, predators, protectors, but he knew they were none of these things, and all of them at once. They were simply human, driven by the will to endure, and that will was stronger than any fleet. He whispered to himself the same words he had spoken in the council, words that now carried the weight of prophecy. Do not challenge them, for they will shatter your empire. And still the galaxy trembled, not because of what humanity had done, but because of what they might do. Their silence was a shadow over every throne, their warning a flame in every mind. And in the darkness of space, the question lingered, unanswered and unanswerable. Would the humans remain watchful guardians of their own survival, or would the day come when their fleets would rise again? And if that day came, who among the stars could stand against them? The stars gave no answer. They only burned on, cold and eternal, watching as the age of fear gave way to the age of humanity. And in that silence the galaxy understood that nothing would ever be the same again.